Welcome to Illuminating Haze, a podcast devoted to bringing light to the dark haze as you navigate college as a social science major or a student going into emergency services or other helping profession. University of Miami student Isabella and criminologist Dr. Kara Hill discuss topics in the areas of academics, career, and mental health. This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Riptide Resiliency and Empowerment Center, a nonprofit devoted to supporting those going into or currently in or retired from emergency services and the helping professions. Let's join them now.
Welcome back to Illuminating Haze. Today is episode 2, and we wanted to talk about navigating back into college and the transition of going back to classes, and also just a little bit of prep that people should be aware of while being in college. And we're going to talk about 4 main topics. These are going to be the adapting to the academic environment, whether you've already been in college for a while or you're a freshman, so going back into it, getting back into the groove. Then also time management and being able to balance everything. I think it's also important to talk about starting to build a relationship with your professors. And lastly, I think that it's very important that we talk about resume building. I know I needed a lot of help in that. I still do. So I think it's very important. And those are the topics for today. So yeah, we're excited to talk about it.
Excited.
Yeah. So on adapting and going back to college, for me, I think I have like 3 weeks left of summer, and then I get to go back to the University of Miami. So the first topic is adapting to the new academic environment. And for me, I have 3 weeks left of summer before I get to go back to classes. And I think the transition from summer back to classes can be kind of hard sometimes for people. I know many get stuck in like another sleep cycle during summer, and then you have to go back to your 8 a.m. classes and just that transitioning again. So, I also wanted to talk about tips on getting familiar with the campus, because this is something that I didn't do for myself.
Yeah.
I personally, my first year freshman, I didn't go to any of the college orientations or anything like that. I got my ID and I got out, and I never knew where my classes were. Like, even until last year, I had to go in the Sunday before school started and find where my classes were because I had no idea. So that's something I really recommend. Don't miss out on. Like, go to the orientations, get familiar with the resources at your university, and start before. So don't do like me that the Sunday right before classes started, you have to go to campus and see where all your classes are and where your classrooms, the buildings, figuring all of that out. Also, getting familiar with the resources that your university provides for you.
That you're paying
So
for, by the way. Like, you
you're
already paid
paying
for
for
your
them.
tuition, so might as well take
Yeah.
advantage of it.
If you look at your payment plans and everything, you're being charged for all these resources that probably you don't know that half of them exist, and they do, and they're there. So I know, like, the University of Miami has a writing center. I'm guessing a lot of universities have things like that that are really, really helpful. And I really recommend, like, learning about them, using them, because you can write an essay and you think it's good, but you take it to the writing center and they're going to tell you
That's
something
right.
else, and you have to change everything. So that's really important. I don't know if you want to.
Oh, I want to talk about that for a second. Can we stop and talk about resources? Even though I'm not a student. When I was a student, I was like you guys, I'm not going to look at resources, stupid. And it isn't until you get older that you're like, oh, I should try to figure this out, right? So 2 things I will say right off the bat in my experience with students is sometimes we're like too cool to check out the resources, right? Like, because we don't
Yeah.
need them and we're in college and this is for partying. And I mean, we have this whole mindset, especially freshmen coming in. And the truth is, sooner or later, you're going to need those resources. So whether that's the writing center, tutoring, counseling services, what's the other one I'm thinking of? Oh, like the nurse, right? There's a nurse on campus or medical facility. But the biggest one I think that I have always sent students to is the writing center. And you just mentioned it, Isabella. So I want to talk about it for just a second. I will tell you, as a professor, I guarantee you, if you write one draft and you take it to the writing center and let them help you, you are going to get a better grade, right? So I see the differences in papers. There's been times where I've like required students to go to the writing center because it's so atrocious, right? Like you go and get help and just it's going to give you a better grade. And they really help you understand that process, which actually then I think in the long run personally makes writing less burdensome, right? Because you have an understanding more of like, how do I make an outline? How do I make good points? How do I make sure I'm writing to the rubric? Stuff like that. So I think that is probably the number one resource that I would say you need to check out right away is the writing center because they're going to make writing easier for you. I think also with AI and the use of AI in papers, I think you have to be really careful because professors know the difference. We can tell when
Yeah.
something has been AI. I generally can tell when someone's bought a paper because you're in class. So often the way that you talk and the things you turn in class or tests that you do is going to be vastly different than the purchased paper that you have. So there are ways that we can tell that. And at the end of the day, I say these things to say, there comes a day if you think you're going to get through college using AI, buying papers, not going to the writing center, doing everything last minute, someday you're going to be 40 years old and you're going to look back and you're going to be like, man, like I cheated all the time. I didn't give my best. And I don't want you to have that guilt on you, right? Like let's start like our mental health journey for life in college and the habits that we establish in college. Truth is you're going to get out, get an internship, get a job, whatever the case may be. Well, if you have like taken the easy way through college, how's that going to affect you when you hit the real world, right? And I don't mean to pick on you, Isabella, but I'm going to. It's kind of like you being an intern. If you,
Yeah.
based on what you turned in class, like you're a great student. But if you had not shown me your true colors and then you become one of our interns, I would have been like, this is not the same student. And I probably would have been like, this internship's not going to work out. Look what you're producing. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
it's super, super important. And it decreases your anxiety when you know what resources there are. That you can go to tutoring and get help in a class. You can have help writing a paper. I think that's really important, as well as counseling services. That's included in your tuition. So you should take advantage of it. There's a lot of struggles from roommate struggles, class anxiety. I mean, it's a lot of new management things which we're getting ready to talk about that you have to start figuring out. Right. And so it's important to know where those resources are. So you're spot on
Yeah.
those for sure.
And also with the resources, I understand how it may seem annoying because you might have, I remember I take 6 classes a semester, so it's a lot for me. And in the beginning, I was like, I want to go home. I finished my 6 classes. I don't want to take it to the writing center and sit an hour and listen to everything I need to fix. Like, I did it. I want to go home. I'm over it. But even just going to the writing center and it takes an hour sometimes, maybe less, maybe a little bit more. But the way that they help you and the resources that you get, and not only that they help you, but you learn how to implement everything they're teaching you into future papers and assignments and whatever, that in the long run, it's going to benefit you either way because maybe the paper that you turn in 2 months after to the writing center, you don't need as much help in because you've already implemented everything that you've learned before that they've told you.
That's right.
So I understand how it may seem annoying, but for an hour of your day, take it, use it, and eventually that hour is going to mean nothing because you're learning so much that then the next paper you get, it's not going to take you 2 weeks to get it good.
That's right.
It can take you a
That's
week.
right.
So
Yep.
it's really like use it.
It's like nothing, like
And
a drop in the bucket of time, right? Like no big
yeah,
deal.
I remember I went my freshman year, I think, to the writing center. And I think I went every single day for a week, an hour, and he was like, no, you need to fix this, and this is not right, and this is not right. By my 3rd year, if I would take it to the writing center, it was fixing spelling, maybe switching a paragraph, like the order of paragraphs, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So it may seem annoying, but genuinely do it. It's gonna help you. And I think it's very important, like the time that you're taking to go to the writing center is going to decrease every single time if you're really taking in the information that they're giving you and implementing that into your own papers in the future. So I think that's
Totally.
really
And I think it's super important. I think too, Isabel, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think you were right at the end of your sentence. But the other part is if English is not your first language, I think it's super important that you hit up that writing center. And I know, you're in that boat, like, because the English language is difficult. And when you're writing, it comes across differently. And I've read a lot of papers like that. Like students have great ideas, but that translation into our writing and our writing styles are much different. So I think, especially if, yes, English is not your first language, it's a great idea to take advantage of things like the Writing Center. I think too, I always feel like I don't understand why students don't do that because you owe it to yourself, right? Like,
yeah.
don't you deserve to have a good grade? And like, don't you want to feel good about yourself and what you're turning in? And it goes back to just having pride in who we are, right? Like wanting to be the best that we can be. And we have to dig deep sometimes to find that. But just little steps like that, that's going to build your confidence because you're going to get a better grade, right? And so at the end of the day, it's like, you're starting to feel good about yourself and getting your groove. And like you said, what is that hour if the outcome is fantastic and it hits so many points, not only of who we are and who we are mentally, but then who we become as a student. So super important.
Going with that idea of taking that hour of your day, I think it's important to talk about time management and balance. So that's one of the second topics for today. And thankfully, I've always, since high school, I juggled being an athlete and being like a student. So I always had time management and balance down to a T. But even me, that I've never struggled with that, it gets hard, it gets overwhelming, it gets tiring to juggle so many things at once. Thankfully, well, not thankfully, but now in college, I'm not an athlete. Like, I don't play for the university or anything like that. But like I mentioned before, I took 6 classes, I think 4 semesters in a row. And that's a lot. Like, that takes a
Three's
lot. And it happens like one semester. I remember I was taking 6 classes, all of them in one day. So I only had Tuesdays and Thursdays, all 6 classes. I was there from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I had to deal with having 3 exams in one day, having 3 midterms in one day. And that balance and that time management of how am I going to study for this one and this one and this one and make sure I get good grades in all of them. And one thing that I have always done is I take syllabus week, which is usually the first week. It's the most relaxed one, but really understand your schedule, understand how to work with it. I've also had a lot of schedules that I've had a 3-hour break in between classes. Use that time wisely. Like, yeah, sometimes I hang out with friends, but majority of the time, and I prefer to have a long break in between my classes because I just sit down and I get work done. I don't leave it till I get home because, well, now I'm tired and then I have another class. You're already in that mindset of you just came out of class, you have a next one going into. Grab that to do more work, because I also think that when you slow down, or which is good sometimes, but like it's the same idea of you're in summer and then you have to go back and get back into that mindset of, okay, now I have classes and now I have tests and now I have homework and I have all of this. It's harder to get into it than keeping the ball rolling. And I think that using breaks in between classes to get even just little tasks done that are going to help you in the future. And I remember this is something my teacher in high school told me about procrastination, and I think it's a very good tip because I've used it till this day. And it's like, if you have 10 things to do, you don't want to do any of them, do the one that's the least annoying to you. Do the easiest one. Like, out of everything that you need to do, start by the one that you like. It's going to be the easiest. It doesn't take that much time, but you're still getting stuff done. And there you start getting the ball rolling, because then you finish that one task that you didn't want to do, but it was relatively chill.
Yeah.
And now you're like, well, I finished this one, maybe I can just do the next one. And you go like that, and that's also working towards balancing like that frustration of having so many things to do, not wanting to do any of them, but you start with the easiest one for you, and that's already helping you. You're already doing something. And I think that's a really good technique. It's helped me a lot. I think it could help you guys also if you start implementing it genuinely. Do the one that seems the least annoying to you and watch how you start not procrastinating as much, because you just started doing it, you're going to keep doing it.
Right. And here's like the core part of time management. In my experience of dealing with thousands of students over 2 decades, I think maybe I can count on one hand how many students have failed because they didn't understand material. The majority of students that don't do well because they don't have good time management. So what happens is you forget that you have a paper due maybe in 2 or 3 classes, or just that you have a paper due in my class. And so you wait till the last minute and then you push something out. And I promise you, what you write the first time, if you were to have started a week before when you knew the paper was coming up in a week and just wrote a little bit each day, you would have had a better paper, right? Exams, people are like, oh, I think I have an exam coming up. You look, you're like, oh no, it's tomorrow, and you cram. You are not going to do as well as you think you can. And some of you might say, well, I'm really good at cramming. You're really good at cramming. I don't know, Isabella, you can speak to this. You get a class like mine in which we don't do multiple choice, right? And it's all critical thinking and application. And it's like, wait, I actually have to know this stuff. And it's a totally different feel. And so I would say that time management, if someone were to ask me, you're asking me right now, what is the number one thing that college students need to do to be successful? It is time management. So just a couple tips I'll throw in there as well that I know have helped students. And I know from my own experience as a student as well. You mentioned the syllabus. The best thing you can do is to get your syllabi and print them. And I know that sounds old school because you guys are so techie savvy, but print your syllabi so you're actually, at least the schedule part, where it shows when your assignments are due.
Yeah.
Put them all in front of you. And now you can see, okay, on this week, I have 2 exams. On this week, because you're seeing all of your classes at one time. You're not flipping between screens. You're looking at one time. Now, put that into whatever schedule mechanism that you use. So, Mia, I'm still old school, so that would be like a calendar. But for you guys, put it in your phone, right? So that you can look at your phone and set a notification. So the week before those papers are coming up, you're getting that notification that, hey, I have 2 papers due next week. Hey, I have, this test next week. That is key. And students that do that, students that can see every assignment that's due for 12, 16 weeks ahead of them, are going to do better because you're taking away the chance of you forgetting or waiting till the last minute. So that's just one little tip that I've used with students that has really helped, is just to print it out, put it into your calendar so that you're seeing everything all at one time. And when it comes to balancing work, I have a lot of students who come to class and they want to sleep because they're tired because they work. And I get that. And I understand that some students have to work. I understand that as well. But you have to make something your priority, right? So if you're paying money to go to college, you probably should make that your priority. And sometimes that means having boundaries. And we as human in general do a horrible job at having boundaries in a lot of facets in our lives, right? But we need to have boundaries even when it comes to time spent with our friends. And that's kind of what you're saying, Isabella, when you're talking about working during your break time. Yeah, like you owe it to yourself, who is paying to get this education, to be successful and to not be riddled with anxiety and freaking out because you're overwhelmed by work and whatever. So, I understand you have to make money, but you've got to find time to sleep. You have to have time to eat, right? You have to have time to do your work, right? You have to figure out that balance. And sometimes that means saying, I can't work a 3rd shift this week. I just can't because I have 2 things done, right? So I think that's really important, that you look at your life and you look at your boundaries for the semester and set those for yourself.
And
and with
also,
writing, and Isabella, I don't remember if you, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
no. That I was gonna say 2 things. With the scheduling and like having your schedule, printing out your syllabi, I usually I schedule everything, but I've also made the mistake of being like, well, I don't need to write this down because I'll remember it.
Yeah.
You won't.
Yep.
Don't trust yourself to do that, because even me, that I've had great time management and I always get my stuff done. You don't know what can go on through the week that makes you forget what you thought you didn't have to write down. It
That's
happens,
right.
and generally, like, it takes a second to write down what it is you have to do. So do it because it happens. It's happened to me a lot of times that I'm like, or you remember that you had something, but you don't remember what that thing is. Write it down. Like, put it in your
That's right.
schedule, put it somewhere, and see it. Because
Yep.
as much as you can think, I'm not going to forget about this, you will. You most likely will. And
Yep.
then also with the balance between work, your friends, school, try to figure it out as early as possible, because if you're working too much and you're sleeping in classes, at the end of the day, you're not going to do either thing good. You're not going to do
right.
well at your job and you're not going to do well at your classes. So you're trying to juggle too many things without organization, and that's not going to lead you anywhere except you're going to get anxiety, you're going to get frustrated. So if you're annoyed and you don't want to do it and I have to go to work and I have to do classes, that's worse. That's going to make it worse for you because you're not going to be able to excel at work because you might be thinking about what you have to do in classes,
Mhm.
or you're thinking about how you slept through the class. So you're not really focusing on your work either. And then in
Mhm.
class, you're missing every single thing that is being taught. And again, like, what I think is super important, you are paying for your education. Now, we always talk about this. Like, I was paying you when you were my professor.
Yes. You were my
Take
boss.
advantage
Yes.
of it. Because,
Yeah.
and college is a lot of money. A lot of
Yeah,
money.
totally.
So don't go to class and sleep through it. One thing that my friends always make fun of me for is I will never skip a class, like, no matter what. It makes me so nervous to skip a class, and say whatever you want. I don't skip classes. Like, it makes me genuinely so nervous. I'm like, I lost all my material. Like, I don't know what to do. Now I'm lost.
Mhm.
You can skip a class if you need to, like,
Mhm.
genuinely if you need to. But take advantage of your classes. Go to
Mhm.
them. At least in Miami, it's an hour and 15, or it's a 15-minute class. You can do it. You
Yep.
can go. Like,
Yep.
so, and I think it's very important, that thing that I mentioned before, of if you don't start your balance early, you're not going to excel at your job and you're not going to excel at school.
Yep.
It's
You're
impossible.
not even
You
really
can't.
excel at being a good friend either. You know what I mean? Because you're
Yeah.
grumpy and you're overtaxed. And it's just so important. It's a simple thing. And by all means, like, you need to have fun in college. I get it. You need to work. I get it. But you have to set boundaries for yourself and you have to have that time management. And, part of that time management is what you said when you were talking about assignments and writing. And one more quick tip I'll give in regards to time management. And Isabella, when you guys are writing papers, I think I gave you guys this tip. I'm sure I did. Is if I give you the second week of class, more details on a paper that's due the last week of class, there's a reason their professor is telling you in advance this paper's due in 10 weeks. Because it should take time, right? It shouldn't be something that you
Yeah.
whip out the night before. Like, there's a reason. It's going to take time. But here's what I tell students. If you hate writing, then why would you save it to the last minute? Because then you're going to be locked a whole weekend, no hanging out with friends, no work, trying to do your paper. And so what I tell students, and this has been very successful with several students, is you write 10 minutes a day. From the time you know what the assignment is, you sit down at your computer with your document open for 10 minutes a day. That's your goal, right? We're going to talk about setting goals. A 10-minute a day is your goal. Here's what happens in those 10 minutes. Sometimes you open up your Microsoft Word document and your 10 minutes is staring at the Microsoft Word document. That's okay, because guess what? You were thinking,
Yeah.
right? Your mind actually starting to kind of like, oh, I got to do this. Sometimes after you've been writing for a while, those 10 minutes a day, you just can't write, but you need to start putting your references together and making sure that your references are correct according to APA or MLA, depending on your major, right? That's one of
Yeah.
those easy things, like you said earlier. That's one of those like no-brainer things that you can sit down, because there's programs, know your programs that are available to help you to do your references, right? But taking that 10 minutes every day, I promise you, will take so much stress off of you, because your 10 minutes is going to turn in some days to 3 hours without you even knowing it,
Yeah.
because you're only setting that goal for 10 minutes. So that is my number one tip when it comes to writing any massive paper. for any class, any discipline, you have to engage in it at least 10 minutes a day. And, obviously when I wrote my PhD dissertation, which took 5 years, I mean, they're massive projects. I had to force myself 10 minutes a day to open that document. And I'll be real, like some days I wrote nothing, but I was
Same.
reading what I had wrote. Right. And I was thinking about it like, oh, that's not very good. I should probably take that out, or I was just kind of venting frustration about a section or whatever. It's just going to create a picture for you in your head that is going to allow you to just write so much easier. And so I really encourage those of you that hate writing, you really need to listen to that tip, because if you hate writing, you're really going to hate sitting down, cramming, trying to get your paper done. I guarantee you
Yeah.
that. So 10 minutes a day is my tip on that, for time management and balance. And those of you that are freshmen, I have to throw this in there. Those of you that are freshmen and you're about to experience freedom that you've never experienced before, likely, man, time management as a freshman is rough because we're not holding your hands. You come into my class as a freshman, like I'm not holding your hand. And that's so different than high school because you kind of get a little bit more guidance. We don't give a lot of guidance often in college. And that's, neither here nor there. We're there to teach you. We're experts in the field. I'm not an expert at being a high school guidance counselor. I'm a
Yeah.
criminologist. I'm there to teach you criminology. And so as a freshman, especially, you've got to do what Isabella is saying. You've got to figure out how you're going to manage your time and work in the time that you're going to be with your friends. Put that on your schedule. I hang out with my friends every night from 7 to 11, but then I sleep from 11 to 7. And then if the more scheduled you are, I promise you, I think Isabella is saying the same thing. I'm sorry. The more scheduled you are, the better you're going to be. No doubt about it. So
And
talk about,
one thing that I think it's important, I think probably every college kind of has a professor like this. The classes that don't give you deadlines. You come in and you think, oh, this is great. This is so relaxing. This class, I can just put it off. And it doesn't have a deadline. Everything is due the week before the semester ends. Promise you, if you're putting that class to the side until the last week, you're not doing well in that class and you're not going to get a good grade.
that's
And
right.
the classes work in the sense that maybe you have 3 midterms for other classes and you say, well, you know what? The midterm for this one, it doesn't have a deadline yet. So I'm not going to do it this week and put a 4th midterm in. But either do it the week before or do it the week after. But don't leave it to the last week of the semester. And
Yep.
I know I've had friends that do that. They're like, no, I'll just finish all the assignments. You have 4 months. You're going to finish 4 months worth of assignments in a week, and you're expecting it to go well for you? Be realistic. That's not going to happen. So those classes, and I think those are very tricky classes because you do tend to put them aside because there's no deadlines. And I have to focus on this essay. So this one, I'll just work on it next week. But then next week, something else is going to pop up. So with that mentality of I'll put it to the side and work on it this week, it doesn't work either. You have to put in your schedule, you make your own deadlines for that class. And that's the one tip that I have for those classes. Just because the professor doesn't put a deadline for you doesn't mean that you shouldn't put one for yourself. Because those are the ones that get tricky. Those are the ones that are going to lower your GPA because you decided to put everything off. And I think a lot of people get that idea of, well, if it doesn't have a deadline, like, I'll just do it. It's just all quizzes. Like, I'll be fine. You won't. You won't be fine. I promise you, I've had friends within, like, us two in the same class. I put deadlines for myself. They don't. And then the last week, they're like, oh, can you please help me with the assignment? Like, what'd you do for this and what'd you do for that? Well, also, I don't remember. I did it the first week. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And don't try to make it work because it's just more stressful.
Yeah.
And
I think sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, like, it's stress that you're putting aside that you're going to have to deal with it all in 1 week. And it's going to be probably one of the worst weeks of your life. So just because you're not stressing about it now doesn't mean that you'll be calm and relaxed the week that you decide to get everything done. it's stress and anxiety that you're pushing aside and you're building on it. So it's going to be even worse when you actually get to it. So just don't
Yeah.
do that.
Totally. And I'll just say, and I don't want to harp on it, but I will say this, that those classes prepare you for life. So here's the reality that often you're going to have like, hey, here's this project. This is what we want to do this year. And you're the project manager, whatever, you're in charge of that. So this is what we need to do this year. I, as a boss, am not going to give you deadlines. It's up to you to figure out, how do I reach this year-end goal? Implementing practices, as you've suggested, and those are great tips that you offered, implementing those practices now in college where you can still have help are going to help prepare you for the real world. And even like if you, let's say you're going to be a cop, even as a cop in a 12-hour shift, of course you have, calls for service and stuff like that. But beyond that, you have continuing education training that you need to figure out when are you going to take that, because that needs to be done in 3 months. You've got to go to the range and requalify. You've got 3 months to do that. When are you going to do that? I mean, there's so many things in the world outside of college that if you can utilize and learn skills now in those classes that have a lot of freedom, but they have an end goal that everybody has to meet, it's actually going to help you down the line in your career and whatever. So good tips.
Yeah. And also with that, and moving on to the next topic, which is building relationships with your professors. Again, we mentioned it in the first podcast, in the first episode, but professors are not there, like you said, to hold your hand and guide you through life and be like, this is what you do next, and this is what you do next. But if you go to your professor and you say, listen, I'm struggling because I've had this happen also when I had the schedule where I had my 6 classes in one day, where I would go to a professor and tell them, listen, I have 4 midterms on Tuesday, and I have them all back to back. Is there any way that I could take your midterm on Thursday, or if I could take it the day before, or take it sometime else? And professors are looking to help you. They want you to do good. But if you show up the day of being like, I'm just so tired, I had 3 midterms, can I take yours next week? No. Be smart about it, and build that relationship with your professor from the beginning. I also, when I had that schedule and I have 6 classes, I let my professors know. I'm like, since the beginning of the semester, I tell them, yeah, I'm taking 6 classes. I just wanted to give you a heads up in case in the future I need to reschedule a certain paper. Would you be okay with that? Because then you also know what professors are willing to accommodate with you. And you take those classes and you're like, okay, well, when it comes to this exam, I can talk to this professor about it. Because maybe other professors are going to be like, listen, no, I can't reschedule you. That's not it. But from the beginning, you've already told your professors how your schedule looks like, what you're going to. And maybe you don't need to reschedule anything during the semester. But you've already let them know. And when it does come to that, it's not a surprise to the professor. And they're not going to not want to help you. They're going to be like, well, you told me from the beginning, you're right. And let's work and let's see where I can schedule you in. Let's see how we can do this. And I also have, for building relationships with professors, I think it's important. You might not be the person that participates the most in class or is the most talkative because you're just not that person. I think we've all had the chit chatter in the classroom that talks every single day for hours, and it's like, okay, enough. I'm not that person. I don't talk as much. If I really have something to say, I'll probably say it. But most of the time, I'm taking in the information. I'm listening. I'm writing down notes. But I have always done something, and if I had a comment that I didn't say in front of the class for whatever reason, I'll stick around after class and I'll tell my professor. And it'll be one-on-one maybe. And maybe it'll become a discussion that we could have had in class, but I didn't say anything. But I'm having it with my professor. And that's also, I think, a good tip for people that don't feel comfortable talking a lot in class, talking in front of classmates because you don't know what the person next to you thinks about what you just said, or maybe you think that what you're saying is a little bit controversial and you don't want backlash or you don't want people talking about you, that's fine. You don't have to do it. But talk to your professor about it. And I think I've built very strong relationships with my professors that it comes a lot from staying after class and talking to them about it. And I think that's really important. And professors, they're not gonna care if you didn't talk in class at all. If after you came up to them and you were like, listen, I had this thought and I wanted to discuss it with you, and you talk about it with them. And that goes again to you're creating a relationship with your professor where they see that you care, they see that you have the wanting to learn and to discuss topics, and that makes them want to help you. And also having that relationship, you can talk to your professor, again, how I was saying in the beginning, like, listen, I need to reschedule this and I'm having trouble with this. Professors are also going to help you with your time management if you tell them you need help. But you need to have that relationship with them to be able to go up to them and talk to them about it. Because you can't just expect to sit there in class, never participate, never talk to your professor, and then expect them to help you and want to help you when you need it. So I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and it's kind of remembering that, when you're in a class, so if you're in my deviant behavior class, for example, it's just me. Like, you as a student are only having to listen to me or remember me or listen to what I have to say. I have somewhere between 35 and 40 students, or at bigger universities I've taught at 100 plus students sitting in a classroom, right? So it's unlikely that I, as the professor, although I try to connect with every student the best that I can, it's unlikely that I, as a professor, am going to take time to individually reach out to each of you to figure out your story.
Yeah.
How many classes are you taking? What do you need help with? Like, I can't do that. So it truly is on your shoulders as a student to engage with a professor. And you're spot on. I mean, and we talked about this last episode, professors are always willing to help. But again, drop your expectations, because it may not be the way that you think that you need help, but we're always going to help you in some way. I will tell you that the students that I remember and that I know are only those that do the things that you're saying. And I hate to say that, but like, I can't remember every student sitting in a class, right? And especially if I teach multiple classes in a day. So if I have 200 students in one day, the chances of me remembering every student's situation is just impossible, right? So it is on you to create that relationship. It is on you. A great way to do that is to come to office hours. If your professor has office hours, I prefer, I like when students just stay after class. I have students that meet me early. I have students that just email me like, hey, I was thinking about this in class, or hey, I saw this on the news. What are your thoughts about this? Because you kind of talked about this in class, or, as I've been moving through this week, I don't understand this concept. Can you help me with that? That's the only way you're going to get help, because we cannot, from a logistical standpoint, go through each student and do a checkpoint. The other thing too is, if I know that you're in multiple classes, so if you came up and told me that, I would say, oh, so what other classes are you in? And you've heard me do this to students. What other classes are you in? So when I'm lecturing, I'll be like, hey, Isabella, have you talked about that in your race and crime class yet? We did a lot of that just this past fall in deviant behavior, because I had students that were in several classes. I knew what classes they were in. So when I was talking, I could make that connection for them, whether it was like, hey, I bet you guys learned this theory in this class. So we're going to learn about this theory here, but we're going to view it through a different population's eyes. And so I really enjoy that as a professor, because it allows me the opportunity to make direct connections for you in the different classes that you're taking. And if I don't know that people are in different classes, then I kind of feel like you're missing out an opportunity to maybe have some connections made for you that might help you understand better. So super important to connect with us. And, you may never talk to me again, but sometimes even just like, hey, I'm Joey and I'm from Virginia. Like, maybe that's all you want to say to me, but you just want to make sure that I know that your name is Joey. You stay after class the first day and you tell me that. I will never forget that Joey is from Virginia. Because again, it's that personal interaction that helps me to remember those things. And so we can't help unless we know you. I can't, right? I'm less likely to help, like you said, if you're showing up in the drama. So if you show up the day of, I'm just having a breakdown. This is my sixth test today. And unfortunately, my response to you is going to be like, well, you've known for 10 weeks that you had 6 tests today, and you
Mm,
never have talked to me
yes.
about that before. And so I can't help you out. And the reason that sometimes you might get that response from a professor, it's about fairness. So I pride myself on fairness. So what I am willing to do for you, I need to be willing to do for every single student in your situation.
Yeah.
Well, professors are not going to be willing to reschedule exams for 200 students in every single
Yeah.
class the
Yeah.
day of. It's not going to happen. So you have to take initiative. That relationship is on you, but you also have to have realistic expectations, and that, most of us hold pretty strong boundaries. Like, it's like a parent boundary, like, I'm not there to be your friend. I'm there to be your mentor. I'm there to be your professor. I'm there to teach you, but I want to teach you the skills that are not only going to help you in college, but are going to help you long term in your career. Right.
Yeah.
So super important to connect. I think, especially freshmen, that is, if you can start doing that now as you're stepping into your freshman year and start just kind of getting to know some professors, it's going to set you up, because I promise you 2 years from now, when you're a junior, whatever idea you have in your head today has likely changed,
Yeah.
right? Whether that's about college or the importance, whether it's your career, whether it's your major. And so establishing those relationships early so that maybe you can have some mentors as you get a little bit further in your college career often is what can connect us for our careers. And then even while, I have students that I still talk to that graduated 8 years ago, right? But I help mentor them in their careers and just kind of help navigate their lives. And those were relationships that were established their freshman or sophomore year. So
Yeah.
super, super important to do those connections.
And that's happened to me where I remember I took an anthropology class. Whew, that was so hard for me. I struggled with that anthropology class, but I went to office hours and I built a relationship with that professor. And 2 years later, I had to write a paper for a Spanish class. And I went to him because I had to talk about native people and whatever, and I knew he knew a lot about that.
Mhm.
And I went to him and he helped me with like the research and what I should add. So it's also, you're building a relationship maybe your freshman year that you don't know like if it's going to go anywhere, if you're going to have benefits from it. You probably will, because I never knew that I could link my anthropology professor to my Spanish final essay.
That's right.
And I would have felt so awkward, and I wouldn't have gone to him even knowing that he could have helped me if I hadn't built that relationship with him before.
That's right.
Because how am I expecting to show up 2 years later and telling him, hey, can you help me with this? And do you have any research papers I could use for this topic? And he's going to look at me and be like, who are you?
Yeah.
I'll be like, oh, I was in your anthropology class. He's going to be like, oh, sorry, I don't, like, no, I have other things to do. Which also, that's a really big thing. And you just mentioned it as well. You have one professor. Professors have hundreds of students. So if you're not making an effort to be known by your professor, they're not going to make the effort. They have hundreds of other students to worry about. So why are they going to worry about the one that doesn't care to have a relationship with them?
That's right.
And it's that idea that build that relationship and have that connection, because you never know how that can benefit you in the future.
Yeah.
I took
Or
an
when you'll need
anthropology
'em.
class. Yeah, and I took an anthropology class because it was a requirement for me. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, I'll just finish the requirement and then buy anthropology for me, because I struggled with the class. I didn't, like, I loved the professor, hated the class. I had such a hard time with it. But then I was able to reach out and have him help me with other
Yeah.
papers that I needed that had a completely different subject and thing to do.
Mhm.
So really just, you don't lose anything from talking to a professor and building the connection. If you don't use it, then you don't use it, and it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
But when you do need it, at least you had it and you talk to them and they know who you
That's
are.
right.
So that's
That's right.
like, I can't stress how important it is
Yep.
to build a connection with your professors. I've had 0 friends in classes, but I have my professor, and they
Yeah.
know who I am,
Yeah.
and if I need help, maybe I don't talk to a classmate, but I'll go up to my professor and I'll have help. Like,
Yep.
very important.
Well, and one thing that students don't anticipate often is reference letters. So whether that's a reference letter going into your career or,
Yeah.
hey, you just get a job during college and they need references. So I will
Okay.
tell you, we do take seriously our name and our reputation, and we talked about this in our first episode too. I don't put my name
Yeah.
on everyone. That I just don't. No professor does. I cannot tell you how many requests I get for reference letters years after I've had students in classes. Sometimes it's only a semester, and unfortunately, I say no more than I say yes. I
Yeah.
cannot write you a reference letter, nor will I write you a reference letter if I don't know you, right? How can I say that, oh, Johnny Q is a hard worker when I don't even remember Johnny Q? You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, so that's one thing I think students forget. I had one actually a couple weeks ago of someone who was getting to be a summer camp counselor and had been a student of mine and needed a reference letter speaking to their character and their self-discipline. And often in college, we don't know a lot of people yet, right? Like we haven't had a lot of jobs. Like we don't really have people that can write those letters. Well, fortunately for the student, I could write it because I knew them. But had they contacted me and I didn't know them and didn't have a relationship, there's no way I would have wrote that reference letter.
Yeah.
I even had a student once who was applying to get a service dog after they had a horrible accident and a disability in which they needed a service dog. And guess what? They're a college student and they had to have a letter of recommendation from a professor. That student never anticipated that tragedy
Yeah.
resulting in that, right? But she needed a reference letter from
Yeah.
a professor. So you can never anticipate the circumstances that life is going to bring to you. I think that's the big thing to put in your head, right? And so build the relationships that you need to constantly, realizing that you have to anticipate that waves are going to come in the future. And you have to anticipate, I guarantee you, I promise you, at some point, you will need something from a professor. You will. Reference letter, internship lead, job lead, career advice, whatever, academic advice, you're going to need it. So start working on that early. Totally agree. Ooh, with that, do you want me to transition to our next little talk here?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to talk about resume building, and I'm going to keep it super short because I feel like we could talk about it for hours. So the importance of really creating a strong resume, and that may sound silly because maybe you're 18 years old coming in and you're like, I don't need to worry about a resume yet. That's for adults, right? Well, what I will tell you is you need to start building that resume now, because whether you're going to graduate school or whether you're going into a career, graduate school, just like a lot of schools going into undergraduate, we're looking for well-rounded people. So when we used to look at, or when I was on a committee that used to look at grad school applications coming in, and we would look at their resume, if the student never did anything and their resume was like 2 sentences that they took somewhere offline because they didn't have anything to put on their resume, that student didn't even get looked at as a possible admission, right? So it's super important that you start building those resumes right away. And you have to be real with yourself because you do have skills that are different than other people. You have a lot of strengths. You have a lot of weaknesses. We're human, right? We're all unique. So we all have different skills and abilities. You need to have a heart to heart with yourself and make a list of those things. So just in the conversation we've had today, if we were making Isabella's resume, and she had to highlight her strengths. What are some of her strengths? Organization, time management, critical thinking, strong communication. That's just in listening to you in 40 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So you have to think about yourself because you do have skills. Write those down. Am I good at organizing? Am I good at leading? Am I good at creative thinking? What is it that you're good at? And highlight those skills. But then the other part is highlighting your achievements, and whether those are academic achievements or whether those are achievements in the community. A lot of people forget about that part. Everybody in this world should be volunteering somewhere. Volunteering changes your life. One, you're giving back, and that is always rewarding to yourself, right? It makes you feel good anytime you can give to someone else. But volunteering is actually building your resume. because you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do, that you're not getting paid to do, that maybe are out of your comfort zone or something you're really passionate about. So you're actually starting to create a little pod to where you can start building your resume. So not only did I volunteer for this organization or do community service for this organization, but in that I learned how to deal with troubled teens. I learned skills of resiliency. I learned the importance of organizational management and leadership. See, you're starting to build that resume. So when you write your resume, you want to highlight not only your academic achievements, so maybe you're, honor roll, straight A student, that's all great. But what else? Right? So if you highlight the community things that you do and the things that you do to try to help others, that is super attractive to someone who's looking for an intern or employee. Right. So when I look at yours, Isabella, obviously you have academic achievements. I think that's great. I know you're a smart person. That's what that tells me. But when you tell me, well, I interned for this organization and this is what I learned and this is what I did. And I volunteered for the dog shelter. And here's what I learned over there. Right. And I did this over here. Now you're telling me about you. And that's what we really want to know, right? Because when your resume is basically a portrait of who you are on paper. So who do you want to hire? Who do you want to have as an intern? Do you want to have the person's just a straight A student? I don't. I would actually take someone that has a lot of experience in a lot of different realms and had a C average over the straight A student. Because that C average person that was involved a lot in the community and did a lot of different things is going to have a skill set that someone that only sat in the books doesn't have, right? Because we could be book smart. So having that experience, because we're all getting in the helping professions, so criminology, sociology, nursing, policing, whatever, who are you going to be helping? Others. So the best way to build that resume going into a job of helping others is to start now helping others. And it's just going to build a whole nother skill set. And obviously you would showcase that on there and your skills and your experiences. So that's super, super important. Highlighting your coursework, projects, honors, that's super important too. It goes with your academic achievements, but you have to think of, where am I applying? It's funny. I was looking at my CV, which is an academic resume. There's a difference between a CV or a Vita and a resume. And sometimes you have to switch between. So this is an academic position. And so in this, I'm really going to hone in on what research projects do I work on with what professors, do I have any academic publications? What were my experiences in coursework? I took these classes, I did these things, I wrote papers on this. Super important. But if you're applying to be a dispatcher, that means nothing, right? But you learn things through that academic process that translate over. And that's one of the reasons we have this podcast, right? Is to join that academic with that practitioner side. So if you go to a research university and you are more on the academic side, University of Miami would be kind of that. If you are more like that, you've got to find a way to bridge over to the practice side of things, because sometimes that balance is what gets you the position. Right. So you don't want to have a resume that is so academic focused and doesn't have any practitioner focus, because unless you're going to be an academic, you need the practitioner side of things. So finding that balance is super key. So my number one advice in building a resume is keep track of everything that you do. So even if you volunteer at the university for a student center event, I don't know what they're called at every university, but student center has different events. I think of last year when they did the big thing, everybody went and saw Barbie, right? So did you volunteer in that? Keep track of everything that you do. And then when you're like, okay, I need to work on my resume, every university has a career services department or an experiential ed department. Guess what? You go to them and you say, hey, I need help building my resume. Here's my list of everything that I've done. Can you help me put this into what it needs to look like? And they will help you. So having other eyes on it, but keeping track of everything you've done. If you coach, when I was in college, I always coached basketball and soccer. I kept track of every time I did that, because it showed that I gave back to the community. That's important stuff, is to have that. It shows mentoring. So keep track of everything you do, get involved. And if you're looking and you're like, well, I don't know what I can do that's in my career field. Here's what I will tell you. If you're going into sociology, criminology, or other helping profession, You are going to be dealing with people in society. I don't care if you work at Chipotle. I don't care if you work at McDonald's. Because what I do know is in that realm, what's going to happen? You're going to have to deal with people that are angry and you have to calm it down, right? Because you're the professional. You're going to have to learn how to solve problems. You're going to have to learn how to work quickly. You're going to have to learn how to stay professional when things are not very busy. It doesn't matter. You're working with people. And hopefully, all of you that listen to this, you are going into people fields, whatever it is, nursing, criminal justice, it doesn't matter. You're going in, you're going to be a professor like me. You need to have people skills. And Isabella, you've had these professors, they have no people skills, right? Because if some people have only ever been academic and they've actually never worked on that other side, not knocking them, I'm just saying it brings something different to the table, right? They're brilliant and they can tell you everything that you need to know, but they might not be able to tell you how to solve a very simple problem that you have at your work. So you have to choose which way you want to go, right? And start building your resume through the things that you do, jotting notes, and then taking all of that list of career services or sending them to a professor. I've helped thousands of students with resumes. I'll help you put that resume together based on that experience. So super important to get out there and do the things that you're going to do. And then we can worry about, okay, now how do and this could be another segment. We can talk about like, okay, how do I pick out the keywords in my resume? You know, how do I write my cover letter? That's a great cover letters. I'll tell you what, often the resume never gets seen. It's the cover letter. You read the cover letter, and if the cover letter isn't highlighting you correctly and doesn't speak to that organization, your resume doesn't even get seen. It's done. So those are really important things. And if you think just in the line of your cover letter, if you don't do anything to volunteer, to get out in the community, to give back, if you're not involved on campus, if you're not involved outside of campus, what do you have to say in a cover letter as to why someone should choose you? That's tough, right? You can't just say, I'm a straight A student. I'm a really good student. I'm really organized. Okay, but how is that going to help me? And you have to remember that. So, you know, one of the odd lessons in life that applies so many times is we have to bring value and we have to give value back to people. You know, I know someone and I think that is a great person, right? But the person next to me doesn't know you, but you still have to sell yourself to them, sell your qualifications to them. You have to bring them value. And sometimes being the good student isn't enough value to that organization. So you need to think in terms of building the resume from day one in your head first, right? Then you look for opportunities. How can I have a multitude of things to put on my resume by the time I'm ready to apply for jobs or ready to apply for an internship? Because if you do that and you see it sitting down, you can look and say, you know what? I have done nothing that shows my ability to work with others. So now you know, like, hey, I should volunteer someplace like maybe Big Brother, Big Sisters, where I'm actually working and I can show that, hey, I play well with others. You know, that's building that skill set. And so the resume part of life for a student really starts in what you do and how involved you are. Get involved in student council, get involved in the student groups on campus, get involved, you know, if you want to go Greek, like whatever, but get involved, and track everything. The other thing that does for you is often our strengths that we think that we have are not our strengths. Sometimes we're like blinded to ourselves, and our weaknesses are not our weaknesses because we've never really put them into practice. We were labeled as, hey, you're really bad at organization. So you've spent the last 4 years of your life since high school with thinking you're really bad at organization. But the truth is you might be really good at being organized. You just haven't been put in the right environment yet to be able to use those skills. So, you know, I encourage you to really break the labels that have been put on you. And whether you're super smart. Well, some people think they're super smart and they get to college and they hit my class. I've had this happen multiple times. They're like, I've never had anything less than an A in my life. I'm like, well, okay. Well, I'm really smart. Okay. You know, because often, especially with standardization of education, K-12, students have had labels on them that they are like super brilliant and they get to college and they get woken up. And it's not that they're not smart, right? But they're not the smartest. And maybe they're not an A student. Maybe they're a B student or a C student. Doesn't mean that you're not smart, right? My point is we have these labels, whether it's positive or negative, that stick on us. We act accordingly. And then we don't understand Like, what do you mean I'm not as organized as I thought I was? Well, I've never had to balance 6 classes before. So maybe now you realize that organization is a weakness and not a strength. That's great. Weaknesses are great because it's opportunities to be able to improve and to tackle those things, right? So I feel that, putting your resume together and starting activities early in college is a great way for you to start figuring out who you are and what are your strengths and where do you need help and where can I go to get help to strengthen this skill set. But it's also going to tell you where you want to go in your career. If you find out in college through this process by getting involved that you just do not like putting events together, don't ever go into an occupation where you're going to be putting events together. But see, you won't know that until you do it, you know? So those are kind of my tips. I know it's kind of a weird way to talk about resumes and resume building, but that's the truth of it. That's how you get to a point of having anything to even put on paper. And then once we're to that point, like I said, we'll cover this in another episode. Like, okay, like we'll do it. We'll do like a mock one where you can like give me all your experience and we will like actually show people that watch this, hey, here's how you put these experiences to paper, right? This is how this looks and this is how this translates. But you never know you're going to need that resume. Right? As mentioned earlier, you might need it your sophomore year before a job at Chipotle or whatever. So make sure that you're getting those going right away. And then lastly, did you have anything to say about that? Sorry, before I move on, I should check with you.
I just think it all, like, if you're going to take something away from this episode, watch how everything that we've talked about eventually connects to every single topic. Like, each individual topic connects to each other, and that's for a reason. And I think that's something that if you understand it from an early point, you're going to be better off. So
Totally.
the time management, the balance, the being able to transition back into the college, the relationships with your professors, and resume building, they're all connected. And having each one of those set and that you understand them is going to help you. And at the end of the day, like you kind of mentioned, a professor can also help you with your resume. And you can build on your resume if you have time management to be able to do things that you want to do and do them well. So everything connects, and the sooner you understand that, the better that it's going to be for you, your college, your career, like everything. It's just understand it and
goes all
apply
together.
it.
It really does. Yeah, for sure. And I'll say, with that, you're going to hear a lot in college, and everyone's getting ready to go back, and you hear this whole thing of identify your goals, have goals for college. Totally agree. Goals are good. But, if you're like me, when I went back to college and I was like mid-20s when I went back, I was like, I don't even know what my goals are, man. Like, graduate? Like, let me just do that. And when I teach freshman classes, intro to criminal justice classes, that's one thing I have students do is like, okay, let's identify some goals. So what I have to say about goal setting is this might knock your socks off, Isabella. That is, goals are important, but in college, your goals should be really short because you're about to be pummeled from a lifestyle perspective, achieving freedom. Some of you are getting ready to enter career, you're seniors, and you're like, oh my gosh, because now you have a whole new full-time job now of trying to figure out where you're going to go, right? Where you're going to get a job. How am I going to do that? And the thing is, if we set too many long-term goals, you're going to fail at your short-term goals or reaching that long-term goals. And guess what that does? That tanks you mentally. So then you just forget about goals altogether, right? So goals don't have to be something huge. Like, obviously, everybody should have the goal that I'm going to graduate college. I'm in college. My goal is graduation. And that may sound silly, but do you know how many students never graduate? So if you want to know, look at retention rates at universities, like literally look up retention rates, and it'll show you that if we can get a 60% retention rate, that is like through the roof good. Retention rates hold under 40% of students that come in actually graduate. And that's even a high number. We're looking at some universities as small as 12% of students who enter as freshmen graduate as freshmen from that university. It doesn't mean they go on, they may go on someplace else or something like that. My point is, very few students comparatively that begin college will actually finish college at that university. So having the goal of like, hey, I'm going to finish this semester. That's a great goal. Do you have to say, I'm going to get A's? No, you don't. Maybe a great goal is that you're going to do the best that you can. To me, that's a more realistic goal, because if the best that you can is a C because anthropology is hard, that's okay, right? It doesn't have to be about the grade. If you give everything that you can to that class and you end up with a C, that should be a success, right? Because you did the
Yeah.
best that you could. We're the ones that hold ourselves to expectations of A's, right? Or B's, and we
Yeah.
equate that to failure and not doing our best. But not everybody comes from the same place. Not everybody's coming from the same schools coming in, and college is extremely hard. Some people have learning challenges and disabilities. Like, not everybody comes from the same place. So setting realistic goals for yourself that are going to set you up for success, not for anxiety and depression and beating yourself up, are super important. So in my experience in working with college students, I always say, you can set a long-term goal or two. And as you get older, those goals will change. So as a freshman, I'm going to tell you, you know what? My goal is to not drink for the first 16 weeks of college. As a freshman, that's like a big deal, right? But having a goal that's attainable and something that you can actually do is what's going to set you up for success, because when we don't reach goals, that sets us up for anxiety and depression and feeling bad. It's just not good. So we want to definitely set goals. It's good to have short-term goals. It's good to have long-term goals, especially as it pertains to your career. So if hey, I want to be I don't know, I want to work with kids, troubled kids when I graduate, have that long-term goal. But a goal is just a goal, and goals can be changed. So you have to allow yourself the flexibility to be okay with changing that goal. And I say that because I've seen students over the years who set the goal like, hey, I'm going to be a cop when I graduate. And their sophomore year, junior year, they decide, I don't think I like policing anymore. I don't think I want to be a cop anymore. But guess what? They are sticking to that goal because they told everybody, when I go to college, I'm going to college to get a degree because I want to be a cop. And now you're getting stuck in an occupation that you don't even want to be in. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this play out, because we feel loyalty to ourselves and to others when we set goals and we let those goals known. So goals are good for the reason of keeping you accountable to yourself and to others. And that's what I want you to put in your head today when you think about goals, whether it's a short-term goal or a long-term goal. A goal is something that is going to keep you accountable to yourself or to others that you tell about that goal. And so you need to be realistic. And it's okay if your goal is to turn in assignments in on time this semester. That's a good goal. And maybe your long-term goal is, I'm going to pass every class this semester. It's okay. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to solve the world in 4 years when I graduate, right? It doesn't have to be that big. It needs to be, more importantly, it needs to be attainable.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's my advice on goals. It's important, but you also don't want to overthink it because you're setting yourself up for failure. And just in daily life, I think you could ask any adult, sometimes my goals are like, my goal today is to just like not spend all day in the pool. Like, that's my only goal today, is just not be sitting by the pool all day, because some days that's the best I can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's okay. Whatever that goal is, you just want to make it something that's obtainable, something that sets you up for success, not for failure. And when you fail to reach those goals, because there will be goals that we fail to reach, you have to practice resilience, the ability to bounce back from whatever it was that caused you to not reach that goal, right? You have to be self-forgiving. You have to show yourself compassion, and you literally have to roll with the punches of like, well, I didn't reach that goal. So what would be a more realistic goal for me to accomplish this?
Yeah.
And just have that conversation. But as mentioned earlier, every university has career services department, tutoring services. They have student services. They have counselors that can help you do these things, that can help you set those goals. And obviously, it's probably pretty obvious with me. I'm the type of professor that you can go to, and you'll find them too, that you can go to and say, hey, I really want to set some goals for myself, but I don't even know like what's realistic. And I don't know what's realistic this year.
Yeah.
Can you help me? Like, what did you do? What have other students done? It's okay to brainstorm that through with someone. I think it's a really good idea. So those are my tips for goals. Hopefully that helps.
It does. Well, That's the 4 topics that we wanted to cover today. And again, we want to invite you guys to comment, give us feedback. If you learned something, if you have a tip that you think could be beneficial to others, write it down. And as well with this episode, we will be putting out a survey. You can click on the link and fill it out, and it would be very, very beneficial to us that you do so. We really would like the feedback from survey. Just you can comment, you can fill out the survey, and if you don't follow us on Instagram, you should.
Yeah, you should.
It's at Illuminating Haze, and then also Stronger Than the Current, right? On Instagram, both Instagrams.
We'll put those down there. Yep.
And yeah, like we said in the first episode, we really want this to be listener driven. So we want to help you, and your feedback means a lot to us. So please comment, fill out the survey, tell us anything that you have on your mind.
Yep. So I was in a conversation yesterday, and it was with a parent whose kid is getting ready to go to college. And of course, I was like, oh, you should check out our podcast. And so if you are listening to this podcast and you fast forwarded through us to the end, and this is all you're hearing, and you don't want to listen to us, give it to your parents, right?
Yeah.
Let somebody listen, because we're providing valuable information. And, our goal is, at least my goal, because I love to take questions, is to get to a point to where, we can even do like a live podcast and have you guys ask questions. I mean, this is for you. You have advantage of a professor and someone who is going to be a senior to be able to give a lot of tips and advice to help you be more successful and to struggle less in college. So definitely message us. Let us know what we can do for you. We're here to engage and to answer your questions. This isn't about us, right, Isabella? We're doing this for you, for others. And we want to be able to make sure that we're doing what it is that you want to talk about, right? We'll talk about anything, literally, probably anything. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks on our episode 3.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Illuminating Haze. Join us in 2 weeks as our hosts Isabella and Dr. Kara Hill bring another important topic to guide your future. See you then.